All right, cue the show. Welcome back. It's your returning champion, Seth Estrada, with my oldest brother, Aaron. Age before beauty. Introduce yourself.
Hey, it's Aaron Estrada here, coming to you from beautiful New Mexico, land of entrapment.
Oh, shots fired.
Yeah.
So it is beautiful, though. I mean, I've got to say, every time that I visited, the sunsets, you see like those paintings of New Mexico, they don't do it justice. It's legitimately that beautiful in the sky. I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of particulate that you're all inhaling. But
you can kind of almost like, it's weird. It feels like you can see the curvature of the earth. Like if you stand up at the top of the Sandia Mountains, you can see so far. It's probably an exaggeration, but that's what it feels like sometimes.
It's beautiful, man. I don't know exactly how New Mexico was formed, by what influences, but I'm grateful that it looks the way it looks, because it's definitely nice to visit. So, man, this week, tons of stuff, right? But top of the list has been SEC, right?
Yeah.
Man, Ethereum, Bitcoin, long-term hodlers, vindicated. Weak hands, well, they're out of the picture anyway, so who cares what they think?
Yeah. Yeah. The fact that it's not a security. I mean, I wasn't expecting that Ethereum wouldn't be a security. I thought that he did say something to the effect of, regardless of the mechanism used to raise the money initially, he kind of threw a caveat in there, but they seem to have let it slide a little bit now that it's no longer a security if it ever was at one point. So
yeah. Oh man, this is unreal. For anybody who's been tuning in to the channel over the last week or so, you probably remember I did an interview recently with a developer that does a lot of VBIOS programming and then a lot of GPU algo and actually some ASIC work as well, ASIC design work, by the name of Christy Lee Minahan. She's got a company called Minority, another company called Oh God, a company, and her handle is Oh God, a girl. She's now pushing for Oh God, a talk show. So we may have another segment, man. I don't know. Maybe perhaps we do. Perhaps we add her to a segment where we all talk about entertainment and connect the dots between technology and GPUs and everything else. I know, totally random. I don't mean to pollute the show with all the other stuff that I've got going on. It's just that now we've got Decentraland and we've got Otoy on deck potentially for interviews.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Jules.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be familiar faces for you. For me, it'll be more facilitation of a conversation about proof of work. So I'm excited about that. But anyway, I digress. That's like the catchphrase for this show. But let's talk about SEC ruling. Somebody asked me when I did a live stream earlier on this week, they're like, what does this mean for mining? And I said, well, actually, not all that much, really. Not as much as you just really tracking and working with your own CPA to figure out what the IRS thinks of your mining proceeds. But I don't know. You tell me, set me straight here. Is that right? Because I'm pretty sure that for miners, the SEC ruling is not nearly as impactful as it is for exchanges.
Yeah, I don't think it really changes much from a miner's perspective. I think in some ways the best part of it is how it changes they finally sort of put a little bit more of a solid line where they consider something a security versus a non-security. And I've seen some commentary by some people that were saying, well, they still didn't answer the question. And it's like, well, because it's a complicated question that you can't answer maybe without the help of a lawyer on your side. Like the SEC is not going to publish you a playbook on how to do an ICO, I guess is what I'm saying. That's never been their role because every project is different. So, but at least they've created a more firm sort of judgment, or it's not a judgment actually, it's just a public statement from an important person at the SEC, not an actual official ruling, but they've kind of at least said, okay, here's where the danger lines are. Like, this is definitely something that's a security because it falls onto this side of the line with the whole Howey test and stuff. And then when something's sufficiently decentralized and cryptocurrency-like, it's no longer a security. And I think that's the important part too, is the fact that they essentially came down with a ruling that says that cryptocurrencies aren't a security, like something that is peer-to-peer and a token, a token of value, I guess you'd say, or a value-based token that is peer-to-peer. That it's like, it's interesting because intuitively, you sort of, if you understand what a security is and you understand what money is, you realize that, yeah, money isn't a security. And so Bitcoin and even Ether to some extent are kind of like a new form of shell money, right? But it's,
well, and by the same,
transmitted over the internet.
By the same token, womp womp, get used to those, right? Dad jokes incoming. But by the same token, you can argue that there's so many other coins. I mean, the top market cap coins, your Dashes, your Moneros, Zcash, and all the forks from Zcash. I think most of them would prefer to be classified as a currency first. Mm-hmm. And but it sounds like with the SEC's ruling, what they're saying is like, well, Bitcoin and Ethereum, you guys are cool, but everybody else, you got to wait outside the club until we decide.
Well, it's the mode of. So again, it's my takeaway from the whole, because I watched the actual video statement and I read commentary after.
Okay, guys, just quick interlude right now. You're going to see I'm going to do a real-time color commentary on that video. So look for a link down below. We might do a separate segment where we do just blow-by-blow color commentary, but it won't be part of this show right now. But sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I think you should definitely at least include a link for people to watch the guy's statements straight from his mouth.
Oh, we will, but it will be Mystery Science Theater 3000 style.
Yeah. But because the interesting thing is, some people they watch the exact same thing I watch, and they either have a really different mode of comprehension, or they just don't have enough background to understand what's being said. Because it always amazes me that how different people's takeaways are from watching stuff like that, where it just comes straight from the horse's mouth. And it's like, first, it's not like hearsay. It's like first person straight directly from the communicator. And yet people have a really different take on what they say. But there was a lot of stuff in between the lines in the things he was saying. So there is a good point that, maybe there is room for interpretation on some of the stuff. But anyway, jumping back to what you were saying about the different coins and stuff. When it comes to certain kind of or pre-sales, let's call them, kind of the stuff that predated the ICO kind of concept, or pre-mining and pre-sales, jumping back more to the side, sort of regular cryptocurrency kind of approach rather than the sort of post-ICO approach to fundraising. A lot of those, I think, could fairly be categorized in or lumped in with that sort of securities-like thing, because they're still selling the coins to fund a centralized entity for the production of that coin. And that's where the SEC, that's where the line starts to get gray again. And the SEC probably starts to get a little bit, their spidey sense starts to tingle, and their regulators start to, the bat phone is ringing. They're ready to jump in the Batmobile and run out and save everybody from themselves. Right. Don't want to make a bad investment. Don't let grandma make a bad investment in, right. Well,
I mean, it's tough because on some level, that is absolutely their job. That's absolutely appropriate. Let me try to use the nice vague government language. Right. It is necessary and proper. Right. These are exigent circumstances. Don't let grandma make that purchase. But at the same time, like crypto at this point, crypto in 2018 is not user friendly. Grandma's not using crypto of any type.
Yeah.
So it's tough to call from right now. And all the projects that are talking about like, oh no, we want to be the first one that grandma uses to pay for groceries or whatever. I'm like, good luck, guys. You got a bumpy road ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know.
That's true. I mean, that's the mantra that they have at Dash, is they want it to be easy enough for like grandma to use. So, so we'll see where it goes with some of these. I mean, I don't know if the SEC has the time to go do enforcement actions on all of these ICOs, though they'll probably pick the ones that look like good case studies and single them out and give them a beat down. So,
yeah. So, man, so it's nuts. I mean, on the one hand, SEC ruling like really impactful because they're finally saying something, right? Instead of saying like, oh, we need to reserve judgment. We need to wait. We need to, wait and see. They're kind of saying that about everything else, but they're also kind of really saying like, just be afraid. Mm-hmm. Just be afraid because we've really literally only okayed 2. Yeah. And everybody else, like, basically watch your back, mind your P's and Q's, eat your vegetables, all the advice. That sounds really good. Well, but when the SEC says it, it's like a secret threat.
I saw what I read between the lines was a path forward for various ways that you could build business models around maybe not utility token type concepts, because the biggest the biggest problem with the utility token type concept versus, and so just to try to paint the distinction between, you know, what I consider a utility token and what's a cryptocurrency, because it's really could be gray if you really don't define it well. A utility token, and you've probably heard me use this analogy before, it's like an arcade token for a specific arcade. It only works in their machines.
Yeah, right? Like the Chuck E. Cheese tokens that guy tried to pawn as Bitcoin. He literally, he would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. Smells $1 million worth of Chuck E. Cheese tokens. This literally happened.
That is a weird story. Can you send me a link?
But to your analogy, it fits.
Yeah. And then a cryptocurrency is more of like a general purpose money-like token that has, so just so that you know what I'm talking about when I use those distinctions. So the way I see that you could essentially do this, and this might be the theory that some of the utility tokens were trying to use in terms, or that their lawyers had in terms of their theory of them being a genuine utility token versus a security, is that you could launch your blockchain that was your value token blockchain that was like a cryptocurrency, and then work on your DApp-like thing that needed a utility token-like thing as a separate project that you did fundraising under some SEC exemption and did all the proper procedures to do that in order to not get in trouble. And then just used the token of value that you created as your main utility token when your main DApp-like product was ready. And so there's a way to essentially mash up all the things that he effectively gave a green light on to create a completely compliant sort of offering and deployment of your DApp-like technology or your blockchain type of technology. I mean, if you're doing a protocol level development anyway, though, I mean, at this point, you could do an ICO, but you could also probably just go to VCs at this point and just raise money.
Well, I think 2018, that is the key takeaway for anybody who's looking at blockchain as though it's going to be the way that they launch their tech, right? Like everybody sort of needs to concede that the wild west is gone. We're only in the Wild West now.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting the money is you can't to continue that analogy, you can't just like rob a bank, right? You can't just fleece people for ICO money. VC does seem like, or just pre-seed seed, if that's all it takes to get MVP on blockchain now with so many tools and so many so many frameworks in place, so many utility blockchains that will allow you to use them as a springboard. An ICO just kind of, it almost doesn't make sense.
Well, the moonshot sort of protocol level stuff, though, does require a lot of resources. The part that's kind of freaky is that, so I'm not sure if like some of these ICOs that have raised like these nosebleed amounts of money actually have ambitions big enough to justify that much money, the need for that much of a raise. Yeah, transformative technology is expensive. It's hard to do, but you know, who needs $4 billion to achieve something? Usually, you're supposed to iterate your way up to a valuation like that.
Right. Well, and in defense of EOS, for example, which I think is I mean, they're the 800-pound gorilla, right, in the room when you say $4 billion. Having interviewed a block producer candidate, it sounds like the $4 billion is going towards, they're attempting to fund projects that are going to launch on their protocol. So launching this protocol level tech, they need to themselves be put in a position to foster growth and development on that protocol.
Yeah.
So I think, to your point, it takes a lot of money to develop something that people actually want to build on. And it takes more money still to encourage new projects to then flock to that new technology. I think that's a tough one.
Well, yeah, so they're like building their own internet in a way. They built their own accelerator or their own incubator to grow their own ecosystem, which makes a lot of sense, especially if you've got gigantic piles of money you don't really know what to do with.
Tron did the same thing apparently when they launched their mainnet 2 weeks ago, and I didn't cover it. I feel kind of bad that I didn't. I probably should, because I recorded a Mystery Science Theater 3000 style video of the launch, but I felt so bad because I didn't want it to come across as like racist because half the people were speaking in Chinese and then having it translated. Anyway, I digress. Tron did the same thing, where part of their raise is to create their own internal accelerator program. It is kind of more of an accelerator than it is, what is it? It's more of a, I'm like drawing blank here. Accelerator versus incubator. One is a pay to play program. Another is like sponsored, right? Essentially, where you're getting sponsored. Theirs is not the sponsorship type. Theirs is kind of pay to play. So they'll issue you loans on their protocol, which was like, I'm blown away that nobody took that away from their mainnet launch. That it's like, wait, they raised tons of money, not because they want to give it to developers, but precisely because they want to loan it to developers. Like they've completely created such a reinforced position in terms of their ability to maintain growth and to maintain capital, that like, even if nobody really launched, they can't lose, other than like never launching. But they've got more than enough money to continue with developing Tron until other projects decide like, oh yeah, we love Tron. We're gonna launch our new app, right? Our new DApp and our new coin on Tron. But they're not sponsoring development. And I don't even know what, like, they didn't mention interest rates or anything. They just said like, oh yeah, we've got our program, so you could get up to $100,000 for your new DApp. It's like, that's cool for a solo team that needs only 6 months of runway, maybe. But for anybody else, and for anybody who's looking like, wait a second, $100,000, it's not a grant though, and you're not. I mean, I wonder if it's non-exclusive, or if they're saying like you can't create interoperability.
Are they? Is it a convertible note? Or I'd be interested to know more, just to see.
I don't know enough about it yet. I don't know enough to. I don't know enough to know what the financial vehicle is for investment there, or for the loan. I just know that at the end of that meeting, I was like, wait, everybody's so excited about this program that Tron launched, but nobody's calling it what it is. It's a loan. It's not sponsorship. That comes due at the end of whatever the term is.
But convertible notes or even warrants aren't exactly like loans. They're sort of like loans, but you settle them in a different way. Sure,
which is why it's important to know what the exact vehicle is. I get it. So I don't know. Maybe I'll put a link down below so you can watch that. It's a little bit long. I already created a sweetened condensed version, but I don't feel comfortable releasing it. But you can watch the Tron mainnet launch as well. I'll have a link in the description.
Cool. Another interesting thing that happened this week is that Satoshi's Place, that sort of collaborative graffiti board. I don't know if you noticed that.
No,
it's like a proof of concept of Lightning Network. It's really more like a game. So do you remember that old thing? What was it called? You could buy pixels on this guy's
$1 million website.
The $1 million website. It's a variation of that kind of theme, or that thing that Reddit did, where you could duel. Like you had like 5 minutes, and you could paint any pixel you wanted every 5 minutes. So a variation of that sort of giant collaborative pixel canvas, but each pixel I think costs like a Satoshi or something. So you can buy like the whole board for like $35. And I don't know if there's a way where you can like push like a JPEG or something to it if you have to manually paint every pixel you want to paint. But I thought that was a pretty neat thing as a proof of concept for, well, yeah, look, it's a completely trivial application, but you can do microtransactions on Bitcoin using Lightning Network.
Oh, man.
It doesn't completely implode.
Here's the thing. We need a visual on this. It needs to happen right now.
Are there any of the penises left on it?
No, just the word.
Apparently there was like a penis duels for like the first several days.
Just the word anus writ large. But okay. All right. So I lied. Oh no, there's a Franken Beans right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Screw us. Zooming out. Right. Don't demonetize me, bro. All right. So yeah, but we'll just from a bird's eye view. Clearly, there's a giant van there, and ChainCon, some other stuff too. All right, that's cool. Let me. That is nuts.
So here we go. Who says there's no useful applications for cryptocurrencies?
We're gonna make our own graffiti right here on Satoshi's Place. Unnamed. Oh, come on.
Well, if you want to push it public, you're going to have to pay for that.
Unnamed Sunday crypto show. Come here.
So how about that? Being able to buy individual pixels for like a Satoshi.
Oh man, that is super cool. Yeah, that is super cool. So, oh, come on. So actually, I'm just doing screen annotation there. So yeah, no, that's not being pushed. I'm not going to pay for changes there. We already own Satoshi's place. We did it for free. Thank you. So that is super cool. Yeah, no, these are the kinds of things. Like, it's kind of sad that the history has to repeat itself. That we've got to go back to the $1 million website to start getting traction. But there needs to be something like this that has a bit of an it factor, right? There's so many dApps that launch that are just sort of like, you could take it or leave it. It's not special.
It's an interesting idea even in itself, though, because of the $1 million website, you got to permanently buy the space. With the thing they did on Reddit, you only got it until somebody else would draw over it. So there was just like battles between red and blue and things like that. This one, it's like graffiti, but it's ephemeral. It's like whoever is willing to pay to overwrite the stuff that's already there can get it for however long it lasts. And there's no guarantee of how long it will last, right? Like, so you could drop something in there. It looks like people have figured out some way of actually pushing images, not just there are painting.
Yeah, it sounded like it's got to be, right? Got to be. Well, I don't dare move it around anymore because there definitely is. I noticed there definitely is a problem with having not safe for work images.
Right.
Alrighty, well, I'm just going to go ahead and stop to share it there. So Satoshi's place, that's cool. That is super cool.
Yeah, that's kind of a neat idea.
Yeah, again, it's kind of hello internet 2001 called.
Yeah.
And but man, who cares?
But with micropayments, I don't know if to be honest, that might be like a real first there, because I can't off the top of my head think of anything that had micropayment sort of scheme attached to like buying individual pixels.
Yeah, well, and then self-service too, it sounds like. So instant self-service, because I don't think with the $1 million website, again, this is internet 2001-ish, I want to say, or maybe even 1999, might have been .com bust era, but I want to say that, yeah, with $1 million website, it wasn't self-serve. You couldn't just like make payment and then drop your art or your pixels down. So so I guess if nothing else can be said for Satoshi's place, it's at least better than the $1 million website.
Yeah, it's an incremental upgrade on the $1 million website.
So awesome. Yeah, so this week, it sounds like then, outside of the SEC ruling and then Satoshi's place launching, I don't know if we want to start doing a dApp watch. I don't know. Tell us down below in the comments, guys. Do you want us to do a dApp watch as just a micro segment as we go through the day's theme or that week's theme? Tell us down below in the comments. Maybe a dApp watch, because it seems like there are websites that do it, but you still kind of need people to talk about it and actually care for any of these things to get traction. And I think that's one of my problems. I just don't care enough about any dApps. There's so many that are like, yay, another CryptoKitties clone again.
Oh, like my game.
Well, I wasn't gonna let name names or anything. But
yeah.
How is it going, by the way? Because I think that yours is unique in that it brings them livestock.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many other like CryptoKitties clones allow for like livestock breeding, which is a thing that people do, right?
3D.
Like 3D is awesome. I'm just going to say, like, living in Texas for a while, when I was doing stereo production, I did. I still have all this. It's like it's unreleased. I should probably put it on Amazon or something, publish it. But I've got a stereoscopic 3D. I did a pilot for a full episode on longhorn cattle. And so I just met a ton of breeders in Texas. This is this really big thing in Texas in particular because of the Texas longhorn cattle. But there are breeders associations, and they are serious. And they're not serious business per se, other than with other breeders. It's like horse breeding, right? Mm-hmm. People pay like tons of money for a stud fee.
Crazy amounts, yeah.
Yeah. And then they just house them so well. And I mean, at least one of the ranches that I went to, it was just a couple that they had full-time jobs, and they worked a full 8-hour day after a commute, got home, and then took care of the cattle until dark or later, depending on the time of the year. But it's serious, man. No, agriculture is serious because they're like, you're very much, you're trying to breed for specific outcomes, whether it's for desirability of consumption, right? Maybe it's something you want to eat, or like in the case of chickens, my wife, yeah, right. Like, and I know you, like my wife caught the bug after seeing some of the chickens that you had when you were living near Van Nuys or in Van Nuys. And so I get it. Chickens are cool.
Yeah.
Livestock is cool. So it makes me wonder, like, what the CryptoKitties thing, like, they may as well be Pokemon to me.
Yeah.
But something that's like livestock, where you can start emulating real breeds that happen in the real world, that's kind of a cool concept. And tracking virtual ownership. But have they talked to you about, like, is it going to turn into like land race? Like, is it going to turn into like a whole farm full of animals?
My vision for it right now is we'll just start with the one kind of critter, and then eventually we'll add other critters to it. But we want to do a proof of concept of just one kind of critter first, because the 3D expression engine is pretty complicated as it is to be able to take genes and expand them to a phenotype of some kind.
Yeah,
is already sort of, I don't want to call it groundbreaking, but
right.
Very frequently in the past.
So you're not wanting to just keep a bunch of like random parts and slap them together, crash them together, right? Like beaks and stuff.
No, it's got to have a way of actually doing it via blend shapes and morphing kind of stuff, actually adjusting parameters that will allow the thing to express the phenotype in a sort of a continuous way, right? Smoothly.
Okay, guys, word of the day, phenotype. And what Aaron is referring to is the way that a gene happens to be expressed. Case in point, we come from the same genetic stock, but we have two different phenotypes. I have a slightly more olive complexion. He's slightly more fair, but you can tell that we are related.
Yeah.
Phenotype.
Yeah, that's phenotype. And genotype is the genes. So the whole game that I built or am building, it's a slow cooking side project, so it's taking a little while to get done, but it's a genetically plausible animal simulation. So, and we're starting with chickens because they're the most awesome animal.
Modern day dinosaurs.
Yeah. So
awesome. So yeah, after I like totally rip on like anything that's a CryptoKitties clone, and then you're like, no, Landrace is kind of a CryptoKitties clone. Oh yeah, totally. I love that.
Yeah.
But I do, I have an affinity for what you're working on. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know. Our grandparents, they had a ranch and a farm, so maybe they've kind of grown on me, livestock. But I think that in and of itself is a cool concept, and it's practiced, right? Again, with these breeders associations, with chickens too, right? And all kinds of livestock, there are pretty serious breeders associations. So I like that more than I like collecting fantasy characters, at least in the sense that, like, you could do this, you could bring it to a breeders association and be like, that's kind of interesting. I wonder, and if you can create pairings and phenotypes that exist in the real world, or then create something that for whatever reason is genetically impossible because there are incompatibilities with whatever, whatever.
The gist of the game is that you can have genetically like predictable outcomes, but the furthest I would say in terms of how it's related to real genetics is that it's inspired by real creatures. Bird genetics in particular are very complicated. We have to omit a lot of stuff just to keep things sane. But it doesn't mean that the bird genetics that are present will be inaccurately represented. The actual dominance hierarchies in terms of the way that genes interact and stuff will be, again, inspired by nature. So we're trying to not mess up, so that if you knew animal genetics and you bred a couple of these birds together, you would get an outcome that would be predictable based on your experience. So
awesome. So there will be no crossbreeding, like the liger of the chicken world will not exist.
Yeah, there won't be griffin chickens, not at least not at first, or chimera of various types, not in the first iterations for sure.
Nice.
Chickens, only genetically compatible creatures can be bred together.
So that'll be the expansion pack down the line, the landrace chimera.
I make no promises, but yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, that's where we're going with that. So nice. I watched your Loki interview with the Loki team. I thought that was pretty cool. The service node concept, I think it's a very inspired concept.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of things right for sure. And as far as service nodes, I think in terms of being able to create like higher utility and a higher degree of service. Yeah. Across all blockchains, it's so important because there's so much waste.
Well, just like incentive, like you think about something like just related to something like Tor network, incentivizing running nodes, right? I mean, I know there's a coin that's like a VPN kind of concept. I can't remember the name. There might be more than one. So I think there's already projects that have said, yeah, we want to do onion routing and we want to incentivize it somehow. But it's still, I think there's probably room for competition in that space. So, and to have your own native token of value to help support that network seems like a natural fit, right? It's like it's like so many cryptocurrency type concepts or blockchain concepts, especially when they have some kind of gas-like token. They sort of are self-supporting, right? It's this sort of like recursive self-booting ecosystem that creates its own tokens of value that then feed back into the ecosystem to support the ecosystem. And then the only other missing component is you have to have some kind of exchange so that people can get fiat or other tokens of value in and out of your tokens of value. But like once you've gotten it bootstrapped, you have like your self-contained ecosystem that supports itself with its own kind of money almost. It's pretty cool. That's one of the coolest things about this whole space, to be honest. It's like, at first it makes your head explode. So like what backs Bitcoins?
The notion that they have value.
Yeah. Participation. And network effect is what backs Bitcoins.
Well, and I'm just going to say like desire, right? The notional value is what keeps people around. So yeah, whether or not there, because I'm not going to say that there's like a bunch of Bitcoins that are because it's a public ledger, right? You can track that there's ownership, and yet they're Satoshi's own stash, and then there are a bunch of bag holders or a bunch of Bitcoin holders that are totally anonymous, and there's kind of not really a good way to prove that they're not all sock puppets.
Yeah.
In fact, there's not even a good way to prove that they're not all sock puppets of the NSA.
Right. Good point.
So it's kind of, it's the notion of value and the notion of participation. We all think it has value. We all think there's participation.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why some people have distrust of privacy coins, because there's no way of even seeing the sort of hodlers that are just sort of I don't know what you would call them, but like cold wallets, basically just wallets that have a lot of coins, or even just like the distribution of the coins. You don't know, are all the coins vested in sort of like some super group, right? Like, have you seen those videos? I can't remember what they're called, but it's like this conspiracy against this guy, and he and it's like that's like the Rothschilds and stuff, and they're like, make it crash, make it. Every single time he buys coins, they're like manipulating the market for this one just dude. He's just this small time trader, but it's like he's being monitored by this giant conspiracy to like essentially crash coins just for him, right? I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, it looks like this guy on Steam crashing. No, that's not right. Come on.
It's like a meme style art.
Yeah, it's but anyway, not make it rain crash. Does that sound right?
No.
Okay. Yeah, well,
find it.
Yeah, Google is not my friend right now.
I can't even remember the name of the artist that did them, but it's like a series at this point. They're pretty funny. Maybe next week I'll have them queued up for anybody who's never seen them.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So yeah, it sounds like this week, it's not like lightweight news. The whole SEC ruling is not lightweight news, but that's like, it kind of has dominated everyone's feed, right? Figuring out like, what does this really mean? And for me, the biggest question has been for my community, okay, we're miners. So what does it mean for us? And I think you kind of came to the same conclusion that I did. Well, not much.
not much. I mean, a fair launch on a coin, a typical kind of mined coin, is not. I don't think it ever would have been considered a security, even by any reasonable estimate before. It's more of like those pre-mines and pre-sales and ICO type things that would have gotten into that realm. Well, I guess the important thing is to say that the SEC has just come down and just said, straight out that these these cryptocurrency-like tokens are not securities. That's not a huge surprise to me, but it's more along like with the ones that are more in the gray area, like Ethereum. Like, when did Ethereum stop being a security? Because it probably was at one point. Like that the SAFT or whatever instrument they used to sell it initially was a security for sure. Did the Ether that was sort of born from that investment contract, did it inherit the security like attributes of the original instrument? Is the sort of question that I think everyone was still wondering about, and the SEC sort of answered it without completely, like I said, giving you a playbook for exactly what you need to do an ICO.
Yeah. So I guess it's good news in terms of the question of like mining versus just buying. And then at least that pair, right? That trading pair of Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's not a security. Yeah. So yeah, everything else, who knows? So track your trades.
Well, and even if, worst case scenario, like as a speculator, worst thing that would happen to you is that, let's say you were trading, you had a large amount of a coin that was judged to be a security, meaning that it would effectively get delisted almost immediately from any exchange that just thought it was a cryptocurrency exchange, but was trading it, because they can't afford to trade it, because then they're an unregistered dealer broker, and that's a big deal for them. They can get in a lot more trouble. You as a holder of it, your recourse is kind of like you could have a lawsuit or whatever with the issuer or these other things, but more, immediately your concern is going to be, oh, great, I'm a bag holder on this thing that I literally have no secondary market for. And you can't even technically, probably, depending on what kind of security they said it was, you might not even have an OTC market for it that you could legally trade it in. So, then your only recourse would be to go after the issuer. But, they don't seem to be doing that too much yet. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's the whole thing is, again, not Wild Wild West, but we're still in the Wild West, guys. Just know that. Talk to your CPA. Retain the services of a CPA.
Yeah,
at all times.
ICOs are extra risky. I mean, I've never done an ICO, so I have friends that are way into them, but I've never felt like they were worth the risk or the effort to chase after them. So.
Yeah, I've got a friend that just launched. It's not. They've got really far out of the way actually to ensure that the SEC wouldn't view it as an ICO.
I meant not be an issuer. I meant participate as a investor is what I meant. Yeah,
got it. It's funny actually. Well, for another time, I've got some people who have been supporting ICOs, and as I've been asking in the shows, like, who should I interview next? And they're like, oh, interview me because I'm one of the biggest bag holders from the ICO, and I'm like, what? Why do you want that kind of attention?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe just as to serve as a object lesson. He wants to warn other people.
Yeah.
To not jump in when they don't know what they're getting into. I mean, because hey, look at it this way. I was there for the Ethereum ICO, sort of like one of the original ICOs. It was relatively cheap. I mean, you flip a few Bitcoins and get a lot of Ether. And, I just try not to think about that too much, because my life would be very different today had I taken Ethereum a little more seriously when it first hit.
Man, by the numbers though, almost everybody watching this video was alive and, a reasonably well-adjusted adult with enough disposable income to have changed their life by investing in Ethereum at that point.
Oh, the difference is it literally crossed my desk. Like, one of my coworkers he was like my main crypto buddy that I talked to about cryptos, said, what about this Ethereum thing, man? And he was talking about the smart contracts and all that other stuff. And I just didn't take the time to I'm like, Turing complete scripting language. That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Try to put that on the blockchain. I actually kind of still think that a little bit, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you're probably not wrong. There are probably a lot of projects for whom, for which Ethereum is not right.
Yeah.
But they've tried to shoehorn it anyway.
I mean, but at the time I didn't understand a lot of the internals of, say, even Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin scripting language was a little off my radar at the time. So it's like I hadn't even drilled into Bitcoin itself that much. So I think at that time there was probably a lot more people like me where they were like, they would have to been almost like Bitcoin developers are really geeky to appreciate the distinction between sort of what Ethereum, what their value proposition was, and sort of like everything before it, right? And there was already, just like there is now, like ICO exhaustion. There was like coin launch, coin fork exhaustion at the time. Like, oh no, not another blockchain. Like, what? Why do we need another shit coin? There's like pretty much no need for it, right?
Right. Well, I want to say actually Dogecoin launched like just before Ethereum, didn't it? Oh man.
Well, it was around that time, yeah, a little bit before it, but it was in that same window of time. It was where, yeah, you're getting to the point where meme coins and joke coins are basically being launched because of fork exhaustion, right? Like Me Too coin exhaustion. And the amazing thing is it's never slowed up even since then. And it'd be interesting to try to just calculate like what percentage of these coins have ever even managed to percolate into like the top 100, let's say, or top 50, like have basically sort of escaped the event horizon of the sort of shit coin suck. like actually moved up to where they were like considered like actually viable, like reasonable projects that actually intended to build something real.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh too much at any one project's expense, because I'm interviewing a lot of project leads and teams that are like fighting to get into the top 100 right now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
there's probably a lot of coins that they're genuinely projects that are genuinely trying to do something real that aren't top 100 coins, but then there's going to be all of these Me Too clone coins, cash grabs that are just a joke and are really super cynical. They don't intend to actually maintain the project at all or move forward. I mean, yeah.
Well, I guess time will tell. I don't think there might be a really good one. Actually, you know what? This is a really good site to share. I just hit my radar. Oh, come on. You're going to appreciate this. Let me make sure that we're not completely like firmly in the territory of demonetization here. We're not. Okay, cool. And just share this. I won't say anything. You'll just have to see it. It's from a mining perspective. So I think the idea here is that you want to be as speculative as possible in mining a portfolio, right? Because you want to try to mine these long shots and you want to try to get like gnarly block rewards, right? Early. But it's still like there's they're not making any not mincing any words here. Just not like they probably fit the description that you gave before. We're like, will it really be a year from now? Probably dead and gone.
Well, when it comes to launching, doing coin launches, I can tell you as a mining strategy, mining coin launches, just really hammering those coins is not a bad strategy.
Yeah,
to do, because even though a lot of these coins don't go anywhere, even within the first few weeks, sometimes the chains die almost immediately. You can get so much. Typically, a lot of coin launches these days have very aggressive early rewards. It's kind of like the whole thing a lot of masternode coins now do too, with like sort of absurd like emissions rates on their masternodes.
The Loki coin team was very explicit about like, hey, anything that promises you 1,000%, nope.
Yeah,
run.
And so they'll do stuff, or even the ones like for a while there was a fad of like sort of doing proof of stake coins, but they always had very steep emissions rates at the early point, like black coin, then white coin, then whatever coin, and every single coin you can imagine. Black Dogecoin, like this is years ago, guys, but still, I mean, all these projects still try to have similar strategies to like essentially bootstrap a community really quickly. But how many Bitcoin clones do we need? I mean, we're in the era now of we're in the era. I mean, the bar is so high now. We're in the era of EOS, right? And Quantum and Ethereum. Like this, the bar is like super high. I don't know if you could really stand out by doing like a Satoshi like clone anymore, a Bitcoin fork effectively with a different proof of work. And yet you still see, are these coins really launching, man? Because
well, apparently this one, like I know for a fact that this one has launched. I mean, because it stands out, right? But like this one is launched, and it is a specific use coin. It's funny that Verge actually became the coin that was accepted in the in the XXX industry. Whereas this one was like launched specifically for that purpose, like it was custom built for that purpose. But then the hemp coin, geez.
Well, cool. The other thing too is that, I mean, a lot of these coins really do have no place, because when you have stuff like atomic swaps on a coin that's like a major top 10 coin, let's say, with Bitcoin or other coins like that, and then things like Lightning Network coming along. I mean, actually, I should say most of the sort of small cap altcoins probably have more to be concerned of than say a lot of the pundits say, oh, like Bitcoin's value proposition is just sapped away by all these altcoins, right? Well, Lightning Network, assuming it works well enough, and it seems to be, kind of starting to be functional enough to be useful for stuff, it sucks all the value proposition away from most of these microcap altcoins, because most of their value propositions center around faster transaction times, lower transaction costs, sometimes specific use cases, which it's like, well, if you can spend, if someone will take your silver, why would you have to spend your gold? Or if someone will take, your Bitcoins, why would you have to spend your dollars? It's like, as long as these these tokens of value are accepted, right? Or you could do an atomic swap on some other blockchain to get the one that you need. You don't need all of these kind of small cap shit coins.
Right. Well, and that's just it. It's funny. You talk about like, oh, it devalues Bitcoin. I mean, I disagree. Like right now we're at a rising tide, lifts all boats. And so for right now, I think anything that gets any kind of attraction and attention at all it does is serve to solidify Bitcoin's place at the top of the heap.
Yeah.
I should probably choose my words a little more carefully.
Yeah. But solid heaps.
Okay, geez. Anyway, I thought you'd kick out of this site. I saw it the other day and I was like, oh my gosh, seriously? Like there needs to, like, do they have an API? Because I need this on my site.
Yeah, you could put a little ticker or a little info bar down on your thing, whatever's the top trending. Well, that's also part of the challenge of the profit chasing, like the auto switching pools, is that one of the things you have to look at all the time, and again, just try maybe get it back on topic for the channel, which is, it's a mining channel, right? But
yeah. There we go.
If the but this is kind of along those lines. Those auto switching pools, most of them are smart enough. They are, even if you're so inexperienced you don't know better, they're smart enough or experienced enough to protect you from yourself for saying trying to mine coins that are so low volume that you couldn't even possibly unload them, even though profitability might be off the charts for like days on end. There's no liquidity in those markets. They're so shallowly traded that it's like, who cares? That's the thing that a lot of the masternodes have going against them too.
That can be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy though. When I had Luke from Pigeon Coin on the other day, he was talking about how they got slammed by coin switching pools. And it destroyed their their mining community, intermittently, because they had the staccato participation where where profitability, like profit versus difficulty was on that roller coaster. And then these profit switching pools, or these coin switching pools, were like, oh, okay, back and forth. Like they were just couldn't make up their minds because they were completely algorithm driven. Right. And so at least at that time I was mining Pigeon, at least for a short time. I had to, right? Like I needed to know what the deal was. And I remember going to the exchange oh, great. Well, yeah, now it's valueless. Now this sucks. But it's clawed its way back.
That's also part of the problem with it too. It's not just the overall, I guess you'd say aggregate volume. It's the volume that's a side effect of the insta mining that's possible. You get all these super, because here's the thing, those super, I guess you'd say, they're mercenaries sort of miners. They're not going to hold those coins. They're only mining them for the profit, meaning that when they insta mine them, they're going to insta dump them too. So they're going to flood the market with those cheap coins, which is of course going to collapse the value of the coins. So you're not only going to get this problem with, I mean, some of them might hold them because they're going to just wait for the pump. There's always going to be a day in the future when they could probably get a better price on the coin, maybe, especially if they got them cheap enough.
I think maybe my sell orders have been fulfilled already. Sorry, Luke.
Yeah, but I don't know which difficulty algorithm they're using. I mean, he might want to look at some of the more aggressive difficulty adjustment.
Well, there's actually pretty. So I don't. Yeah, as far as difficulty adjustment, I don't know what they're using either. I know just in terms of proof of work, they created their own, and it's one of these X16 offshoots, right? So there was X16R that launched with Raven. They went to their own called X16S. He talks about it in the interview, guys. I'll link that one at the end of the video, but because it's interesting and Luke's a fun guy. But he talks about why he did it. He reached out to the devs and he was like, hey, so I think we could probably get more consistent power consumption because you're going through 16 different algorithms and it's like there are these weird spikes. So you could probably just more consistently figure out what your demand rate is from your utility, for example, as a miner. Like you're saying, even as a mercenary miner, you're not going to have these weird fluctuations. You're going to just no, this is your demand, right? This is your peak. And he said, okay, so that would be nice to know. And it'd be nice to sort of have that be attached to a consistent hash rate too. So so that every 5 minutes when I check in, depending on which side of the cycle it's on for proof of work, it's not like, oh yeah, your hash rate is way low versus way up here. And have that be more a function of which of the sub algos it was mining at the time. So interesting proof of work, what Luke did, but for difficulty, yeah, I don't know what he's using.
Mm-hmm. The Loki guys mentioned an interesting thing in their interview, which is the idea that some kind of runtime compiled custom proof of work almost, which I thought was a pretty neat idea. But they did have a good point about making that deterministic.
Yeah.
But when you hear that though, I'm thinking, well, shoot, if you have some kind of runtime compiled thing, even if it was bytecode, now all of a sudden they push back on the useful proof of work notion, but they basically also outlined the sort of foundation of what would be a useful proof of work, proof of useful work. Sorry, the order of the words matters.
Yeah,
proof of useful work. That would be the engine for that. I mean, in a way, you could essentially push code through the thing. Now, of course, there's a scary part for that too. If it's literally machine code you're compiling, there's a vulnerability aspect of it too. But if it's some kind of bytecode, like now that we have WebAssembly coming along, you've got a whole new bytecode interpreter engine coming along that's not Java, and it's what's another popular one? Python has its own bytecode and Perl has its own bytecode, but you have WebAssembly, which is supposed to be fairly high performance, and it's comparable to Java in a lot of ways. You could use that as your bytecode engine, to do native compilation, and that'll help sandbox the work into a safe memory space so that you maybe could at least do other people's work without any risk of your machine being attacked. Yeah,
but then on the flip side, though, as far as security for the person issuing the distributed work, the question is how granular can you, what kind of slices of their work can they send across the network, and then what can the average system accommodate to make it actually meaningful, right? So it's useful work, but is it meaningful because you might not be able to. You might be able to slice it all the way down to something that doesn't totally choke the network.
Well, stuff like rendering, of course, as well, because you have to have so much of the data set in order to do useful 3D rendering. The security thing from the job requester's perspective is always going to be an issue. I think, did we talk about that last time? I think about that before.
Yeah, we might have talked about it at a different time, but I think what I'm really wanting to do. So I got to actually, while we were talking at the beginning, Christy from Ogata Company, she was talking about how I work with the render token team all the time. So I think she wants in on a roundtable with Jules.
Yeah.
And so we can kind of talk about that specific problem. Now we might want to talk about to maybe one of their the render project leads, not so much to the Otoy team, possibly. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a huge problem. You look at their advisory board, J.J. Abrams, clearly he's interested in having this do studio work, be available for studio work. He has to be. And even if it's not Hollywood studio work, it's going to be, maybe lesser studio work for TV, maybe international even. But they don't want their stuff stolen. They don't want their stuff, randomly, sent to who knows where and possibly intercepted and interfered with.
Yeah. Well, having gone through the Disney Marvel security audit, I can tell you that any kind of distributed or decentralized system is not going to pass muster with their expectations for security. So,
yeah. So it begs the question with what the Loki team is talking about and what you're saying.
Yeah.
Says internet connection is stable.
Just kind of jumped for a second. Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. The recording's probably fine. I didn't see a jump over here, but so with what the Loki team is saying, to what extent can you encapsulate meaningful chunks of work or meaningful slices of somebody else's work? And where does that bring us now in terms of the unique qualities and properties of the lowest common denominator, CPU, and then ARM even, right? ARM is up and coming. There's going to be, in my estimation, or my opinion, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more ARM-based desktop computing in the near future. We've already got people who, for the last 3-4 years, have been walking around with an iPad and a Bluetooth keyboard instead of a laptop. Mm-hmm. So if that's what the lowest common denominator is, then is that meaningful in terms of proof of work?
That's sort of the value proposition of my whole new startup, right? It's all about the fact that it kind of doesn't make sense to build heavy compute on-prem anymore. Now, the whole mining thing, I'm interested in talking with this whole thing with Christy too, because when she talked about useful proof of work, and then some of the conversation seemed to turn a little bit towards rendering, it kind of pointed at that. I mean, that's very useful to me. And I've pitched you this idea in the past of the idea of building miners so that they weren't just typical miner builds, something more along the lines of a proper VM host that could be used to do real compute, because now you're not just building this thing that's optimized for doing hashes. There's been a lot of stuff. Shoot, my machine wants to, let's see. Remind me later. It's just an update. I thought it was running out of batteries. No, it's just
so inappropriate. Windows. Jeez.
Yeah. I sort of lost my train of thought. But this whole
So something that's beyond just VM class server, stripped down.
I know where it's going.
Hash optimized stuff, but having it be a little bit more almost workstation class, but.
There's been a lot of exposition lately on this whole notion. It's interesting because maybe it's just because I watched your interviews with Christy, mm-hmm. and then some of your interviews about proof of work. There just seems to be a growing realization that proof of work isn't all that it's sort of been chalked up to be. And our conversation even centered around a lot of that same stuff, of where I was talking about how there's this more simpler proofs of work actually kind of make more sense than these more convoluted ASIC resistant ones. And then jumping back to that initial thought of building machines that were more general purpose compute for the purposes of doing useful work, as well as also doing mining. As long as you're building a footprint of hardware, let's build a footprint of hardware that can do something useful beyond just this sort of mindless hashing.
Yeah, and that's what I love about so right now, Walton Chain, I've got a series of videos that I'm prepping the content for, some build videos. The great thing about Walton Chain was that it was initially designed to be hashed on CPU. So I guess more, primarily for CPU. And then
if you have enough RAM and a CPU, you can start to do some interesting stuff.
Right, and that's just it. Walton Chain was designed to have a minimum requirement of 8 gigs or more of RAM, which puts it, that's not a ton of RAM in today's world, but I think Linus Tech Tips did a video on how 16 gigs is enough. Mm-hmm. Actually, still, even though you could conceivably throw in 64 or 128, and there aren't that many use cases in which that really is all that useful. Mm-hmm. But Walton Chain requires 8, so you could do 8 or 12, and then that's just fine. It's not cost prohibitive to do a system with 12, and then it only allows for 1 GPU. And then recently, multi-GPU builds or multi-GPU miners have come out, but Walton Chain builds wind up being a little more beefy in CPU mm-hmm. and RAM than most mining rigs. So I'm exploring that right now with the Walton Chain builds and with these conversations surrounding proof of work and proof of useful work, thinking, well, shoot, Walton Chain kind of got this thing started where you need a beefier system to mine their coin anyway. So I wonder, what's that going to take? Like to sort of segue from a couple of coins that go this route to then saying like, all right, well, we've leveled up. We're not just using Celerons and stuffing this like one class of card into this box.
Well, and one thing to keep in mind too, when it comes to decentralized or cycle scavenging sort of compute, it doesn't have to be perfectly efficient. It's what they call high throughput computing. It's not the typical high performance computing, which is a little bit more about actually getting. Well, you have all these different kinds of things, right? You have supercomputers, you have high performance computing, which is usually sort of like grid computing sort of frameworks, and high throughput computing, which is like more of a loose grid of compute. So it's about making up for the efficiency of the individual, or I should say total system design, let's say node to node, by just having lots of nodes. And you can get a lot done if you've got a lot of nodes. So, and rendering is one of those things that, even though it is, it's not terribly bandwidth heavy, but it does have some heavy data that sometimes can go with it, but it's mostly compute bound. So that's one of those things that actually fits that pretty well. Certain kinds of signal processing. So there's some kind of like cool stuff you can do even with that type of architecture, like a more grid type architecture or loose grid architecture. And I've been obsessed with that kind of stuff for like forever, ever since broadband became a thing, like at home, like when you had cable internet available at homes. And I realized, well, shoot, this is just a crappier Ethernet network.
Right.
If I could just create tunnels to those other hosts, I could actually create my own ad hoc grid.
Right. Well, and here we are in the age of reasonably available fiber.
Yeah. And blockchain, which is this final like bit of glue, because now you have a settlement layer. That was one of the challenges before. It's like, yeah, you could create that grid, but all of the stakeholders had to essentially be really pretty close collaborators. You had to have access to their machines at a pretty deep level. Now you could maybe say, well, okay, well, if you will voluntarily, it's like more like the SETI at home model or something like that. If you'll voluntarily run this process for me, then I have a way to see. With SETI at home, it's more about bragging rights. But if you have a blockchain like settlement layer, it's like I actually have something I can pay, like a token of value. I can pay you.
Right. Well, and the Loki guys were pushing back on that because using the SETI at home, that particular example, right? That are protein folding are the two like top use cases when people say like, oh, proof of useful work. It's a distributed project, right? That already requires a lot of compute. The missing link, man. The missing link is security. And like you said, a settlement layer, right? A blockchain, which blockchain does very well, but how do you do that with some of these other projects, and how do you get them on board? A couple of projects that I think I want to have on the show soon, or on the channel soon. One is, of course, Render Token. The other one is Golem. And then there's one that I wasn't aware of before, but somebody mentioned in the last video, SonM. And I wasn't even aware of them. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, they actually predated Golem's project. I don't know if they're as well funded. Golem did a really good job of raising money, but yeah, they're on my radar. And they're a little bit more of they have a little bit more of an HPC background, more of like a tight, fast system design background. So their value proposition seems to be a little bit more around building clusters or collaborations between clusters, right? Like HPC infrastructure that is grafted onto other HPC infrastructure. So like a more low level infrastructure that's faster. Now we'll see if they are able to deliver on that, because like, it's one thing to ask somebody to let them use your one PC. That's kind of already asking a lot for a lot of users. It's another thing to say, hey, let me use your co-cluster, right? Like inside your lab.
Yeah. Well, and now with professional mining, man, geez. The amount of like these systems, even though they are very much built for hashing, right? They're not really great at general purpose compute. It seems like they wouldn't be, but yeah, like the sheer volume of GPUs that I've seen in some of these places, like that'll be a tough sell, right? Like you're saying, to balance that, and then also say like, yeah, and it's worth your time. Like we're actually profitable. Like it makes sense to mine us.
Well, think about it this way though too. The competition is general purpose compute rental, like cloud. So that's another reason why that whole idea of building slightly better machines was appealing to me. It's like I'm building machines to slightly above cloud mining or mining, crypto mining economics. So they're still crappy builds. They're not like You're not necessarily using ECC memory. You're not using fancy cases.
Yeah.
You're using a tier 1 data center because you're not so worried about redundancy, because the workloads, you're thinking, okay, it is high throughput computing. If part of the infrastructure goes away, you'll just retry the job on another part of the infrastructure. So if you build the compute with lower expectations like that and different assumptions, well, naturally the cost of that compute per compute unit is probably going to be lower. Now, you might have to do things like do redundant calculation in order to just, for example, if you're not using ECC memory, one could argue you can't actually be certain that the result you got is right, because a bit flip could have completely messed up your entire result.
Yeah.
But when the stuff is like low, it's not mission critical stuff. You're not like trying to send somebody to the moon, or it's not like a medical use case or something where a bit flip is going to literally lead to a loss of life.
Yeah.
You're just rendering an image. A bit flip means one pixel got dithered a little differently.
Right.
It's not a big deal. Or if you're doing a Monte Carlo simulation, it's the same kind of thing. It just means, okay, one sample of your Monte Carlo simulation, whatever type of model you were trying to simulate, it's a little more fuzzy and it takes a little longer to converge because you're doing sort of a not perfect approximation in the first place, right? So,
yeah. Oh man, so I've got to quickly let's not going to do a full 180 here, but we've got to come back to this because the original seed for today's show was Ethereum, Bitcoin, and the SEC ruling. So let's put a pin in that, because this is the central question, man. This is the central question that we're coming back to with every single one of the coin projects that I'm interviewing, and I've got several that are still on the docket. I know for a fact that Graft is on board. I know for a fact that Ion is on board. And it looks like Zencash is coming up soon as well.
Oh, cool.
Zcash hopefully will, Zuko, return my calls. But a bunch of other projects who are coming on board. And we're talking about proof of work, man. We're talking about like, where is this all headed? Because these other projects are promising, but the vast majority of GPU hash power is being diverted to projects that are profitable. So we can't just we can't ask everybody, right? Like, hey, for whatever purpose, whether it's for entertainment or whether it's something that could be perhaps life-saving, and where there is higher precision needed, even if there is some way to create that system, we can't reasonably ask miners to just switch. Unless
they won't. I mean, and that's one of the things too about, I was going to bring it up in terms of doing useful work, or whatever you want to call it, rendering or whatever, but work for hire, let's call it, compute work for hire. The incentive structure changes a lot. Like there's the game theoretic component of mining. There's not a lot of ways to cheat it. There's ways maybe to optimize a little bit, like if you figure out slightly better ways of, like, if just basically implementation details of the way the hash algorithm works and stuff, like the Bitcoin, what was it called? That sort of faster hash thing that the Bitmain guys were doing. But with when you're actually expected to do useful work, there's a much higher incentive to cheat, basically, is what I'm saying. Which means it's like buyer beware. The person paying for the compute's going to have to, the system's going to have ways of automatically checking for cheating and people shortcutting stuff, or intentionally not delivering the amount of work they said that they would.
Right.
And so the incentive structure changes a lot around that model. Unless you could literally pair the sort of useless work proof of work with the useful proof of work in such a way where they were sort of conjoined, even if it made the useful work less efficient, it was sort of wrapped in the loop.
Yeah, or
was necessary.
Yeah, obfuscated at least, if not, in some meaningful. And that's what I'm wondering about.
Obfuscation won't work though, because a smarter programmer will just figure out how to rip that part out of your code. It has to literally be in line of the actual execution loop. So they can't tear it out and get away with something.
Yeah, so I mean this is the central question. This is why spoiler alert, anybody who I've spoken to and I've said like, hey, my community has asked for me to interview you, because they're seeing it now, right? In the Discord channels and in Telegram and in Rocket Chat. I'm like, hi, my name is Seth, and I'm going to interview your team because we're going to talk about proof of work. That's happening. And spoiler alert, it's not because I care about ASICs. It's not just because I'm pro GPU, because I am. Let's be honest. I'm fairly pro GPU, but it's not just because I'm like, oh, I'm anti ASICs, or I'm anti Bitmain, or I'm anti whomever. Like, the silicon all comes from the same approximate geographical area in the world. So I can't be totally anti, and I'm not anti progress, but I am kind of anti useless work.
Yeah.
And so many of these different coin projects, they're like, oh, we made a new algo. And no disrespect to Luke, because Luke was awesome and I love the way he innovated. But so many other projects are like, yeah, we're going to be ASIC resistant. And I'm like, but like, to what end? Like, what is the point? Like, even something as simple as like, okay, so what's the byproduct of mining in today's world? Heat, at least. Okay, so why don't we go and create new and first person, by the way, from a project that is already thinking about this, contact me because I've already worked on some infrastructure here. But why aren't we taking mid-scale mining and large-scale mining operations, and because you're doing negative pressure rooms, why aren't we piping that heat into greenhouses, right? Or like growing tents for anything that would grow under those circumstances, but most notably medicinal marijuana, right? Like, because the laws in this country are changing and that's a burgeoning industry, why aren't we recapturing that waste?
Don't they normally have to get rid of the heat though, especially when you're using artificial lighting?
I think it really depends. It depends on the grow, and it depends on depends on, in the same way that you have to amend the soil based on optimal growing conditions, depends on where you are. So if you're in an area where it's, where you get like 8 months of ice cold, then no, actually you might not. There might be a need to pipe the heat in like at a certain stratum, right? Like of where they're growing. You might actually want to pipe that in, and or if you're doing aquaponics or something, you might want to preheat a certain amount of water that goes around and is being filtered in.
Right.
I'm not I didn't study agriculture or horticulture, so like don't quote me on the whole like greenhouse design thing. My only point is there's so much waste.
Yeah, there's a lot of heat that just gets blown into the air. Yeah, and
but I'm not even just talking about heat. There's also just waste. It's just wasted work. Like the utility of the blockchain that you're mining for, that's the utility of mining. Yeah, cool. But computers weren't conceived of just to do this. So yeah, what can we get them to do that actually contributes to society or humanity, or even just fun, right? Like rendering games, or complex scenes for entertainment. So anyway, spoiler alert, if you're part of a project team that has gotten that notice from me, it's because I want to talk to you about proof of work. And at the end of the day, no, I don't mean like, are you going to fight the ASIC that is coming out for your coin? I mean, like on a much deeper level, let's talk about proof of work.
It's interesting. Like I said, there seems to be this rising level of consciousness all of a sudden around this whole thing. And it was one of the team from Siacoin wrote a whole Medium post that was kind of pulling back the curtain on the whole ASIC situation and stuff. And it's like, these are things people suspected for years, but I mean, he's claiming to have firsthand knowledge of the experience of essentially as a result of going through the process of developing an ASIC, right? It's as bad as everyone thinks. It really is. Like that whole world is like real cloak and dagger, and there are more probably ASICs and FPGA type stuff in the wild than you want to believe. And
So and I mean, like with respect to that, I think there are some aspects of ASIC and FPGA manufacture and mining that are probably just categorically wrong, right? Categorically. Just from a humanist standpoint, like a form of abuse towards other people, right? Like with the sabotage and, like you said, the cloak and dagger and the real risk to the livelihood of entire communities to turn it into a zero-sum game needlessly. But beyond that, I just like, if you're part of a founding team, I just want to talk about proof of work, the very nature of proof of work, and where it's headed, and what you're going to do about it 5 years from now, right? Or 3 years from now. Like not right now, because we're going to counteract what Bitmain is doing, behind closed doors, or was doing 6 months ago, because realistically you can't pivot fast enough, probably. But proof of work in general, where's it all headed? And proof of stake, cool, unproven. It seems like most projects are still like, we're not going to move from proof of work for a while. So how are we going to shape proof of work is the big question that I'm asking. If we're not going to completely migrate away from it, then what are we going to do to turn it into something that makes sense? Anyway, it's this huge tangent we could go on, and I'd love to have you as part of the conversation as I go into this and start doing the panel discussions, right, or the roundtable discussions. But I'm just like, in the meantime, one coin project at a time, just kind of get some background, let them express in their own words what they're doing, where they came from, and what their thoughts are on the whole like ASIC resistance thing and proof of work. But then I want to bring it back around to different projects communicating. Everyone is so siloed, right? They're all really focused on whatever their fork is, right? Or whatever the mothership did that they're building on. And very few of them are having these conversations where it's like, yeah, like realistically, where is this headed? Like, I don't actually have a 3-year roadmap. And certainly with proof of work, we've all been talking about, like with Ethereum at least, and talking about how it's going to move to proof of stake. Eventually, probably, maybe. But then there's not much thought or conversation that's going into it, I think, beyond that, at least not in a very public way. So,
I mean, the last news I saw, they were talking about maybe rolling out the proof of stake at the same time that they rolled out the sidechains stuff. So they're still actively working on it, but it's the bigger problem. And this is, I think it came up in one of your interviews actually, which I hadn't even considered too much. They would really benefit from a masternode sort of incentivization scheme because their blockchain is getting so huge. I'd never really thought about it too much apropos of their particular project, but it's a good fit for it.
Yeah, the Loki guys again. Again, Josh and Simon, guys, just know you're going to be back on the channel very soon.
And that's one of the reasons why the whole service node concept's brilliant, because as soon as they put that stuff out there, it clicked in my mind. It's like, well, it's very similar to, oh man, if I lose my connection, I'm getting a lot of lightning out here. It sounds like the EOS approach to having delegated proof of stake block producers, essentially really incentivizing it strongly for a core of service providers to provide a high level of service, right? But you could still do that with a traditional decentralized system that was more like masternode-like, or they called them with Loki, a service node concept. You could have, or even you could even call them delegates, right? But they have a different incentive structure to where you could say, well, yeah, if you're dropping the ball, you're not really providing excellent quality of service. Let's say you don't have the bandwidth, you don't have the storage to actually store full block archives and stuff. Then you lose your role. And even if you could put up enough collateral, but if you lose the votes of the system, or even if there's automated votes, right, that'd be difficult to gain. But essentially, quality of service checks that were emitted, just watchdogs from the network in a decentralized manner. And then, it'd be almost like a Smurf attack, right? Like once you've started dropping the ball, like you start getting tons of like bad votes, right? From all of the automated watchdogs. And then you would be delisted as a provider.
Those are perhaps with an escalation scheme that can then in reverse de-escalate that status as checks are made and you fall back within range.
And you could tune these things over time, right? But I mean, yeah. Anyway, I was very impressed by that. Just it was a big light bulb went off when I heard their ideas. So I was like, wow, okay, I could see what's getting them excited about their project. I mean, they're just keeping them, getting them up early in the morning to work on that every day. So I'm not sure how they're going to solve it on Ethereum. The whole blockchain being a terabyte already, and I know that the working version is still several hundred gigs. For the working copy of the blockchain. So those kind of smart, and if you're trying to use the blockchain as the all singing, all dancing database for everything you ever do, naturally it's going to endlessly grow. And you got to figure out you got to have a plan for that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Vitalik, call storage coin.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering where it's all headed. Yeah. I'm wondering where all it's headed. So that's spoiler alert. That's going to be the sort of like founder series, right? Or the project interview series. That's what it's all about. We're talking primarily about proof of work, and we will go back to some other themes in future months. But for right now, it's proof of work. Today, though, we were talking about the SEC and the ruling on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Guys, we probably need to wrap the show. I've gotten a couple of comments from the private Discord. We've got a sub channel on the Discord server that is, at least for right now, it's called the Sunday Crypto Show. And we've gotten a couple of comments about one from a moderator, Corey, And he said, I think that the ruling is huge because of all the coins based off Ethereum would have become securities. They, as well as all the other coins, most likely would have been halted on all exchanges until they complied with SEC regulations, which would have cost a lot of money. Some of those coins wouldn't be able to afford it or even be approved potentially. Millions lost on these coins because your money potential is frozen forever.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely huge there. From mining perspective, maybe not so much, but for Ethereum specifically to be okayed, and then with the caveat that, even if you launched on Ethereum, you're still probably going to be under evaluation by the SEC, but not categorically a security.
Right.
Big deal. But I think that's the top comment that we got from the Discord on this one, guys. Be sure to join down below. It's in the description or the show notes down below. So you can join our Discord server there. And then we shoot this right now. We shoot it. It's asynchronous, but I think we might be going live in the near future. So we'll be looking for your comments there, your input. Let us know down in the comments today what you'd like us to talk about for next week's show. Of course, something really big happens like the SEC makes another ruling. I'm sorry. What you say just won't matter. We're going to have to talk about that.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, let us know, what did you find useful from the show? Feedback for us, topics you'd like us to talk about. Do you love the length of Aaron's beard? Do you want to see product in it? Shall he braid it for you? These are the important questions, guys. But let us know in the comments. Till then, Aaron, do you have anything you wanted to end the show with?
No. I'm going to keep you tuning into Seth's interviews of this founder series because so far these have been awesome. I mean, I'm hoping the channel starts to get more subscribers because these interviews deserve to be seen by way more people.
Well, hey, thanks. I appreciate that. You guys are the reason that I do this. Audience members, you're the reason I do this. So just these are the questions that I think a lot of us, if we could have the private audience of these project founders, we'd want to ask these kinds of questions. So they're impartial. They're free. So I'm not extorting a price from any of these projects, which again, you've heard in the interviews, this is a real problem in the crypto space. A lot of middlemen and a lot of fudsters,
gatekeepers, trying to extort money out of people.
Yeah. There's just not, I don't think that there's a place for that in terms of trying to get real answers and trying to start real discourse. So we're going to keep it real. Cool. All right, guys, till next week.
Yep.
See ya.
See you next week, Seth. Or I'll probably talk to you before then.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to stop the recording. We're going to talk for like another 2 hours now. All right, guys, get out of here. Later. We'll see you next week.